My favorite jazz bar in Queens closed last spring. Yesterday, I walked past it. Now it's some trendy cafe serving avocado toast and coffee with plant-based milk. Young people with laptops and wireless headphones. No one looks at each other. No one listens to live music. I stood on the sidewalk for a minute, remembering how Frank and I used to dance here every Friday, how he would spin me around in his arms, and we would laugh, oblivious to those around us. 73 years old is not a death sentence, no matter what my brother-in-law says. I still go to Tai Chi in the park 3 times a week, drive my car, and read without glasses. My hair is completely gray, but thick and long. I wear it in an elegant bun, as I have done all my life. Court interpreter Helma Tyndall has always been known for her poise and attentive gaze. My phone vibrates, interrupting the flow of memories. 3 missed calls from Cordelia. My only daughter, my pride and joy, and my pain. She didn't call back yesterday, which means I can expect another tirade today. I pour myself some coffee and look out the window at the neighbor's yard. Their children are riding their bikes, and my grandchildren. When was the last time I saw them? Thanksgiving, I think, and even then only briefly. Lowell made up some excuse to leave quickly. The phone rings, and I flinch, spilling coffee on the table. Mom, are you ignoring me? Cordelia's voice sounds annoyed. Hi, dear. I was out for a walk. At 10 in the morning? There is so much disapproval in her voice that I involuntarily look at my watch to make sure. Yes, I like morning walks. The weather is beautiful right now. You always find something to do instead of what's really important, she interrupts. I'm calling to remind you that you promised to pick up my old photo albums. Lowell says they're taking up too much space in the storage room. Lowell says, of course. For the past 7 years, I haven't heard a sentence from my daughter that didn't start with Lowell says or Lowell thinks. I remember, dear. I'll stop by this week. No today. We're leaving tomorrow for 3 days. Lowell is meeting with potential clients. I sigh heavily, but only to myself. Out loud, I say, okay, I'll be there for dinner. No later than 3. I have a spa appointment at 4. She hangs up without waiting for my response. It's always like this. I look at my reflection in the window. Wrinkles I've earned honestly. Laughing, crying, squinting in the sun. They say I still have good posture. Years of working as a court interpreter have taught me to keep my back straight even in the most stressful situations. For 42 years, I have translated testimonies, confessions, and evidence. I know more about people than I would like to. I know how their faces change when they lie, how their hands tremble when they are afraid, and how their eyes freeze when they hate. My brother-in-law's eyes are always icy when he looks at me. I met Lowell Knight at Cordelia's college graduation party. He was tall, with a perfect smile and ambitions that surrounded him like an aura. He charmed us all with stories about his landscaping company and his plans to turn every garden into a work of art. Frank whispered to me then, too smooth for my taste. But who would listen to us? Cordelia looked at Lowell as if he had brought her the moon from the sky. Their wedding was perfect, like something out of a magazine. Frank was already very ill by then, but he found the strength to walk his daughter down the aisle. 3 months later, he was gone, and a part of Cordelia died with him. Or maybe it wasn't her father's death. Maybe she had started to change even earlier, under Lowell's influence. I didn't notice it right away. At first, it was little things. She stopped wearing the jewelry I had given her. She stopped cooking my recipes. She stopped calling me just to chat, without any reason. When Clayton, their first son, was born, I rushed to the hospital with gifts. Lowell thanked me coldly and said they would prefer a gift certificate to a children's store. When Abigail was born 2 years later, I already knew to only give gifts that had been approved in advance. I take my favorite burgundy coat and silk scarf out of the closet. It's October outside and windy. As I drive up to their house, large, with a perfect lawn and geometrically arranged flower beds, I always feel out of place. It's as if my old Toyota offends their immaculate driveway with its appearance. Cordelia opens the door without smiling. Mom, you're late. It's almost 3. Traffic was... Never mind. Albums in the garage. Lowell has everything ready. She lets me into the house, and I involuntarily sniff the air. It always smells of furniture polish and freshly cut grass here. There's no hint that children live here. Grandma! Abigail, my 6-year-old granddaughter, runs out of the kitchen but stops halfway, hesitating to hug me. Hello, sunshine. I lean toward her, but she steps back. Don't call her that, Lowell's voice calls from the living room. He comes out, tall and fit, in his usual cashmere sweater. Cordelia, didn't you tell your mother that Abby is allergic to perfume? I don't have any perfume, I say calmly. It's just hand cream. Which smells, he wrinkles his nose demonstratively. Abby, go upstairs and play with your brother. My granddaughter obediently runs away without even saying goodbye. I watch her go and feel something tighten inside me. The albums are in the garage, Cordelia repeats. Lowell already took them out. I'd like to see Clayton. He's busy. He has an online Chinese lesson. At 9 years old? Mom, the world is changing. Chinese is the language of the future. Not everyone is stuck in the last century. I swallow my resentment like a bitter pill. I nod and follow her to the garage. There are 3 cardboard boxes on the concrete floor. Everything's here, says Lowell, appearing in the doorway, including those old records you always wanted to take. I didn't say. They're useless anyway, he interrupts. No one listens to vinyl these days. My jazz collection. Helma, he never calls me mom or mother-in-law, only by my name, as if I were a casual acquaintance. At your age, it's time to get rid of junk, not collect new stuff. Cordelia stands nearby, her eyes downcast. She used to stand up for me. She used to be on my side. Now she just nods in time with her husband's words. Want some help loading the boxes into the car? Lowell asks, but there's no concern in his voice, only impatience to get rid of me. No thanks, I can manage, I reply, straightening my back. As I lift the first box, Lowell remarks, be careful, don't strain yourself. We can't afford another emergency room visit because of your stubbornness. He's referring to an incident 2 years ago when I slipped on their perfectly polished floor and sprained my wrist. They had to cancel dinner with clients, and Lowell never misses an opportunity to remind me of that. I silently carry the boxes out and stack them in the trunk. Cordelia stands in the doorway with her arms crossed over her chest. Mom, she says quietly when Lowell walks away. Forgive him. He's just stressed about the new project. The client is very demanding. I look at her beautiful face, which has become almost a copy of Lowell's, with the same cold reserve. Of course, dear, I reply. Tell the kids I love them. Yes, yes. She is already distracted by her phone. Oh, I forgot to mention, we are planning a Thanksgiving vacation. We're flying to the Bahamas. All together? But we always celebrate. Mom, the kids are growing up. They need experiences, not a traditional turkey dinner. Another holiday alone. I nod as if it doesn't matter. Of course, dear. Have fun. She goes into the house without saying goodbye. I get behind the wheel and look at their perfect house. Abigail's little face flashes in the second-floor window. She waves at me, surreptitiously, so her parents won't see. I smile and wave back. On the way home, I stop at my favorite jazz club, the Blue Note. They know my name here, my favorite cocktail, and that I never miss the local quintet's performance on Wednesdays. Today is Wednesday, and I decide to stay for a couple of hours to clear my head of the unpleasant aftertaste of the family gathering. Mrs. T, hello, greets Ray the bartender. The usual? Yes, please, Ray, and order me something to eat. I sit down at my table in the corner where I have a good view of the stage. The quintet is already tuning their instruments. The young saxophonist nods at me, recognizing a regular customer. Tough day? Ray asks, bringing me a Manhattan and a plate of snacks. The usual, I reply with a smile. A visit to my daughter. He nods understandingly. Ray knows my story. Here at the Blue Note, I am known not as Cordelia's mother or Lowell's ex-mother-in-law, but as Helma, a lover of jazz and good whiskey. The music starts, and I close my eyes, letting the sounds of the saxophone wash away all the bitterness of the day. Here, I feel alive again, real. Here, no one reminds me of my age and that I should get rid of the junk. In the evening, when I get home, I sort through the boxes of albums. I find photos of Cordelia as a child. Here she is on her first bike, with a tearful but happy face. Here Frank and I are taking her to first grade. And here she is 16, winning a young poets competition. Frank was so proud of her that he showed everyone the newspaper clipping for a week. When did everything change? When did my affectionate, loving daughter turn into a cold copy of her husband? Maybe I missed something. Didn't teach her something? I put the albums away and take out the records. Frank's jazz collection. He collected it all his life. Lowell is right. Many have switched to digital formats. But that's not the point. It's about memory. About touching something that was part of a loved one. I put a Miles Davis record on the old turntable, which miraculously still works. The sounds of the trumpet fill my house, and for a moment it seems to me that Frank is here again, sitting in his chair, nodding his head to the beat. What would you do, Frank? I ask the emptiness. How would you protect our daughter from what she's becoming? But Frank is gone, and so is the answer. There is only me and my heart, which still aches for my daughter, even if she doesn't appreciate it. The phone rings, and I flinch. Could it be Cordelia? But no, it's Winifred, my former colleague and only true friend. Helma, how are you? Her voice sounds dull. I was with my daughter today, that's enough. Winifred knows the whole story. Was that pompous turkey acting like he owned the universe again? I smile involuntarily. Winifred never minces her words. Same as always, only worse. Cordelia is completely on his side now. You have to stop this, Helma. How long can you put up with this treatment? She's my daughter, Win, my only one. Who lets you be treated like a doormat? It's not right. I know she's right, but what can I do? Cordelia is a grown woman. She made her choice. I just want to see my grandchildren, I say quietly. They're not to blame for anything. And you're not to blame for your son-in-law being a scoundrel. But you're the one who suffers. After our conversation, I sit for a long time, staring out the dark window. The music ended long ago, but I don't put on a new record. The silence weighs heavily on my shoulders. I remember the times Lowell ridiculed me in front of the children, how he called me old-fashioned and backward, how he used me as an example to show his grandchildren how not to live, how he once threw away the cake I baked for Clayton's birthday, saying that sugar was poison. And every time, Cordelia remained silent. Sometimes she tried to smooth things over, but she never took my side, never to tell her husband he was wrong. Now she herself has begun to treat me with the same cold contempt, as if I were an annoying obstacle in their perfect life, a burden they can't get rid of just because of social conventions. I close the album and put it away in the closet. In my living room, on the mantelpiece, there is a photo of Cordelia from her college graduation. She is smiling, her arms around Frank and me. It was our last happy photo together, the last moment when we were a real family. I put the photo face down. Maybe it's time to admit that the Cordelia I knew and loved is gone, that she has been replaced by a cold, calculating woman for whom I am just an inconvenient reminder of the past. Maybe it's time to stop hoping that everything will go back to the way it was. I pour myself a glass of wine and return to the photo albums. Among the family photos, I find pictures from my career. Here I am receiving an award for 20 years of impeccable service in court. Here are my colleagues and I at a Christmas party. And here I am interpreting at a high-profile trial that was covered by every newspaper in the state. I was a good interpreter. Accurate, impartial, but always picking up on the nuances. I knew when the defendant was lying, even if the judge didn't notice. I could see when a witness was hiding something, even if the lawyers couldn't prove it. I forgot how strong I was, how confident. When did I let my brother-in-law and daughter convince me that I was just a burden? For the first time in a long time, something like anger rises inside me, quiet but persistent. I've been silent for too long. I've endured for too long. I fall asleep in my chair with a glass of wine in my hand and a photo from the trial on my lap. I dream of Frank. He sits across from me like in the good old days and says, "You're stronger than you think, Helma. You've always been stronger." Almost a week has passed since our last meeting with Cordelia. I haven't called her. She hasn't called me. Business as usual in recent years. If it weren't for the grandchildren, I think we would only see each other on major holidays, and even then, not all of them. On Thursday, I spent the day as usual. In the morning, I attended a Tai Chi class for seniors, then stopped by the library to exchange books, and after lunch, I helped out at the community center. We collected items for families in need. Winifred often jokes that I volunteer so I don't have to sit at home alone, and she's right. Since retiring, the silence in my house can sometimes be deafening. It was around 5 in the evening when the phone rang. It was Cordelia's number. I was surprised. She usually texts me if she needs something rather than calling. "Hello, dear," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "You never know what mood your daughter will be in when she calls." "Mom?" There was something unusual in her voice. Excitement? Nervousness? "We have amazing news." "I'm listening," I replied, sitting down in a chair. The last time she spoke with such enthusiasm, they had bought a new car. "Lowell got the contract," she blurted out. "The one he's been working on for the last 3 months. You have no idea how important this is to us." I really had no idea. Lowell never talked about his work around me, assuming I wouldn't understand anything about modern landscape design anyway. "That's wonderful, Cordelia. Congratulations." "It's not just a contract, Mom. It's a partnership with Lakeview Estates, the most prestigious residential complex in the state. Lowell will be responsible for all the landscape design, from the main entrance to the private gardens. It's millions, Mom, millions." Her voice was so reverent that it made me uncomfortable. Money had always been their measure of success. "I'm very happy for you, dear," I said sincerely. My son-in-law's success, however I felt about him, made my daughter happy. "We're having a celebratory dinner tomorrow night," she continued, "at the Azure Coast. Do you know that restaurant?" Of course I knew it. It was one of the most expensive restaurants in Queens, where ordinary people only went on special occasions. "Yes, I've heard of it." "Lowell insists that you come," she said, and something in her tone made me wary. "He says it's a family celebration and the whole family should be there." Lowell insists? The same Lowell who made it clear every time we met that I was a tiresome obligation to him? Something didn't add up. "Will the children be there too?" I asked, trying to hide the suspicion in my voice. "No, just the adults. It's too late for the kids, and the restaurant isn't really a suitable place for them. So that's it. Adults only. So it's not a family celebration, but something else. A business dinner? But why would they need a retiree who knows nothing about landscape design?" "I don't know, Cordelia," I began cautiously. "I've been going to bed early lately." "Mom," her voice took on a familiar tone of irritation. "This is very important to Lowell and to me. Please don't start with your excuses." "I'm not refusing, dear. It's just, it's just what? Is it so hard for you to devote one evening to your family?" She raised her voice. "After everything Lowell does for you?" I almost choked. "After everything Lowell does for me? What does he do for me besides tolerate my existence?" "You're right," I said, deciding not to argue. "Of course I'll come. What time?" 7 o'clock. Please don't be late." And she hesitated. "Wear something decent." I swallowed my hurt. In her opinion, I apparently dressed indecently. "Of course, dear. I'll look appropriate." After the conversation, I sat in my chair for a long time, trying to understand what was really going on. Lowell had never invited me to business events. Moreover, he always tried to keep our communication to a minimum. What had changed? In the evening, I called Winifred. As usual, she picked up after the first ring. "What's wrong, dear?" "You sound worried." I told her about Cordelia's call and the mysterious invitation. "That's strange," she said. "Maybe he wants to show off his perfect family to his partners?" "You know these corporate types. Image is just as important to them as real business." "Maybe," I agreed, but something still bothered me. "But why now? In all these years he's never—" "Maybe his new partners are old-school people who value family ties," Winifred suggested. "In any case, be careful, Helma. I don't like this sudden concern for family unity." "Do you think I should back out?" "No, go, but keep your ears open and wear that blue dress we bought on sale last month. You look $1,000,000 in it." I smiled. Winifred always knew how to cheer me up. "Thanks, Win. I will." The next day, I couldn't concentrate on anything all day. I rummaged through my wardrobe trying to decide what to wear. The blue dress Winifred had mentioned was elegant and stylish, but wasn't it too youthful for a woman my age? Or maybe the gray suit I wore to my last official court event before retiring. But wouldn't it be too formal for a holiday dinner? In the end, I settled on the blue dress, accessorizing it with the string of pearls Frank had given me on our 20th anniversary. The pearls were real, not some kind of imitation. Frank always said that real things don't have to scream about their value, they speak for themselves. I called a taxi, deciding that after dinner I might have a glass of wine and didn't want to risk driving. The driver, a young man with tattoos on his arms, whistled when I came out of the house. "You look stunning, ma'am," he said sincerely. "A date?" I smiled, appreciating the compliment. "A family dinner." "Your family is lucky," he winked, helping me into the car. The Azure Coast restaurant was located in an old mansion on a hill overlooking the bay. One of the founders of Quincy had once lived here, and now his descendants had turned the house into an exquisite establishment for those willing to pay for the atmosphere and status as much as for the food. I arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, as Cordelia had requested. The maitre d' greeted me at the entrance. "Good evening, ma'am. How can I help you?" "I'm here for the knights table," I said, trying to make my voice sound confident. He checked the list. "Yes, of course. They are expecting you. Allow me to show you to your table." We walked through the main hall, full of elegantly dressed people chatting quietly over glasses of wine. The maitre d' led me to a table at the back of the room, where Cordelia, Lowell, and another middle-aged couple I didn't know were already seated. Lowell looked up at me with raised eyebrows. He clearly hadn't expected me to look decent. "Helma," he said with a strained smile, "I'm glad you could join us." Cordelia also stood up, quickly kissed me on the cheek, and introduced me to the unfamiliar couple. "This is my mother, Helma Tyndall. Mom, this is Reginald and Edith Pearson. Reginald is the manager of Lakeview Estates." "It's very nice to meet you," I said, shaking hands with my new acquaintances. "Likewise," replied Reginald, squeezing my hand firmly. "Lowell was just telling us about your amazing career in court." I glanced at my brother-in-law in surprise. Since when had he been interested in my career? "Yes, yes," Lowell chimed in with an enthusiasm I had never seen him show toward me before. "My mother-in-law was one of the most respected court interpreters in the state. 42 years of impeccable service." I almost choked when I heard him call me mother-in-law. He usually avoided any words that hinted at our family connection. "Do you speak several languages?" Edith asked with interest. "4," I replied modestly. "English, Spanish, French, and Italian." "Incredible," Reginald exclaimed. "Nowadays, it's rare to find someone who speaks several languages at a level high enough to work in court." "Times were different then," Lowell interjected, and I noticed a familiar note of superiority in his voice. "Now, of course, everyone uses automatic translation. Technology is advancing." "No technology can replace human understanding of nuances," Reginald objected, to my surprise. My mother was a translator at the embassy, and I grew up appreciating the art. Lowell hesitated slightly but quickly regained his composure. "Of course, I completely agree. I just wanted to emphasize how much the world has changed since Helma started her journey." Dinner continued, and I watched with surprise as Lowell transformed into a completely different person, an attentive son-in-law, proud of his family. He commented on what a wonderful grandmother I was to his children, how wisely I had managed the family affairs after his husband's death, and even mentioned that he regularly consulted with me on important matters. I sat there, smiling politely and nodding, but inside I was growing more and more puzzled. What was going on? Why was he putting on this show? And most importantly, why was Cordelia participating in it, knowing that it was all a lie? "Your grandchildren must adore you," Edith said, and I saw genuine warmth in her eyes. Before I could respond, Lowell interjected, "Oh, they can't wait for their grandmother to visit. Helma has a wonderful way with children. She participates in a reading program for children at the local library." It was true, but how did Lowell know that? I had never told him about my volunteer work. Cordelia also looked surprised, but quickly added, "Yes, Mom has always been very active, even now at her age." "At my age?" I asked with a slight smile. "Honey, you talk as if I were 90, not 73. Laughter broke out at the table, and even Lowell joined in, though I noticed a warning glint in his eyes. "Mom has always been sharp-tongued," Cordelia said with a strained smile. "That's a wonderful quality," Reginald remarked. "My mother was like that too, straightforward and honest to the end." Lowell hastened to change the subject. So what do you think of my preliminary sketches for the main alley? I've taken all your wishes regarding Japanese motifs into account. The conversation turned to business matters, and I was finally able to relax and just observe. The persons turned out to be a pleasant couple. They clearly valued family ties and traditions. Reginald mentioned his mother warmly several times, and Edith told how every Sunday the whole family, including her 90-year-old grandmother, gathered for lunch. Now I was beginning to understand why Lowell was trying so hard to impress them as a caring son-in-law. The Pearsons were old-fashioned people who valued family, and for Lowell, this contract was apparently a matter of life and death. By dessert, I already felt like an actress playing a role in a strange play. Lowell continued to shower me with compliments, Cordelia chimed in, and the Pearsons seemed to be completely bought into this illusion of the perfect family. We should get together as a family sometime, Edith suggested. We have a country house on the lake, and we often have barbecues there on the weekends. It would be wonderful if you could join us. That would be wonderful, Lowell replied enthusiastically. Helma loves nature, right? I nodded, deciding not to complicate the situation. But inside, I was growing indignant. Using me as a prop to create the image of a perfect family? That was low, even for Lowell. When dinner was over and the Pearsons began to say their goodbyes, Reginald held my hand in his. It was very nice to meet you, Helma. It's clear that you've raised a wonderful daughter and beautiful grandchildren. Family values are something we particularly cherish at Lakeview Estates. Our motto is, we build homes for families, not just housing. Thank you, Reginald, I replied sincerely. It was nice to meet you both as well. After they left, the atmosphere at the table changed dramatically. Lowell dropped his mask of caring son-in-law and leaned back in his chair with a glass of whiskey. Well, it seems to have gone well, he said, turning to Cordelia. The old man was clearly impressed. The contract is in the bag. They're very nice, I remarked, taking a sip of wine. It was especially nice to hear how much you value my experience and wisdom, Lowell. I didn't know you thought I was such a wonderful grandmother. Cordelia tensed, and Lowell gave me a cold look. It was a business dinner, Helma. I said what needed to be said. In other words, you lied. I was creating a certain image, he snapped. Pearson is an old-fashioned sentimentalist. Family history and traditions are important to him. If I had said that we see each other once a month, and even then only out of obligation, it wouldn't have made the right impression. I looked at my daughter, expecting her to say something, but Cordelia avoided my gaze. And you agree with this strategy? I asked her directly. This contract is very important to us, Mom, she replied quietly. Lakeview Estates is on a whole other level. She hesitated. We could have completely different opportunities. I understand, I said, although I didn't really understand. Was money and status really worth lying so blatantly? But why invite me? You could have just told them about your wonderful family without me being there. Pearson specifically asked about your presence, Lowell admitted reluctantly. He said he wanted to meet Cordelia's mother. Apparently, he was testing how sincere I was when I talked about family values. So I was a test of the authenticity of Lowell's family well-being. And I passed that test? I asked ironically. More than that, Lowell nodded. Then, after a short pause, he added almost reluctantly, Thank you for playing along. Cordelia suddenly put her hand on mine. Thank you, Mom. It was important to us. I detected something in her voice that I hadn't heard in many years, something like sincere gratitude. And for a second, it seemed to me that maybe all was not lost between us. Maybe somewhere deep inside that cold shell, the Cordelia I knew and loved was still alive. But the illusion vanished when Lowell unceremoniously called the waiter over and asked for the check. It's late, he said, without even looking at me. We still have to pick up the kids from the babysitter. Of course, I said, gathering my purse. I won't keep you. Cordelia walked me to the door while Lowell paid the bill. You were really convincing today, she said quietly. The Persons are thrilled with you. I'm glad I could help, I replied, trying not to let the bitterness seep into my voice. I hope you get the contract. She nodded, looking past me. Mom, she began, but fell silent as if unsure what to say next. Yes, dear? Nothing. Just, thanks again. I had the feeling she wanted to say something else entirely. Maybe she felt sorry? That she was uncomfortable with this performance? That she missed the days when there wasn't this wall of alienation between us? But the moment passed, and Cordelia was already retreating back to the restaurant where Lowell was waiting for her. I'll call you a taxi, she said briskly. It'll be here in 5 minutes. No need, I already called one, I lied. In fact, I planned to walk to the nearest bus stop. I needed some fresh air to gather my thoughts. Cordelia nodded with obvious relief and quickly hugged me, a formal gesture without any real warmth. See you later, she said, and quickly left. I stood at the restaurant entrance, watching her go, and felt a strange mixture of emotions. Sadness at the realization that to my daughter and son-in-law, I was just a tool to achieve their goals. Anger at myself for allowing myself to be used in this way. But somewhere deep inside, a small hope glimmered. Maybe this evening had changed something? Maybe Cordelia would remember what it was like to be proud of her mother, to see her not as a burden, but as a person worthy of respect. I slowly wandered to the bus stop, breathing in the fresh evening air. Tomorrow I would call Winifred and tell her everything. She would, of course, be indignant and say that I should have exposed Lowell right in front of the Pearsons. And maybe she would be right, but today I just wanted to hold on to this strange, fragile feeling of hope. Hope that all was not yet lost between me and my daughter. That somewhere behind the mask of cold indifference, the Cordelia I knew and loved with all my heart was still there. 3 weeks have passed since that momentous dinner with the Pearsons. Lowell got his precious contract. Cordelia called to tell me the news, but the conversation was short and formal. No words of thanks, no invitation to celebrate together. It was as if my role in this drama had ended, and I had once again become an annoying nuisance in their perfect lives. And yet, that evening changed something. I noticed a change in myself. I used to take their neglect for granted, thinking that perhaps I deserved such treatment. Now, however, indignation was growing inside me. The Pearsons' reaction reminded me that I wasn't just an old woman whose time had passed. I was a person who deserved respect. Winifred, of course, didn't miss the opportunity to say, I told you they were using you. But even she was surprised when Cordelia called me on Thursday. Mom, her voice sounded unexpectedly warm. Lowell and I would like to invite you to dinner on Saturday to celebrate the contract. I couldn't hide my surprise. You want to celebrate with me? Well, yes. A familiar note of impatience appeared in her voice. You did help us make the right impression on the Pearsons. Lowell thinks it would be fair. Lowell thinks. The eternal refrain. Well, that's unexpected. Where are we going? The White Orchid. Did I know that restaurant? Of course I did. Another expensive restaurant in the city center. Not as fancy as the Azure Coast, but definitely not the kind of place Lowell would take me just for fun. Yes, I've heard of it. Great. We'll meet there at 7 and… She hesitated. The Pearsons will be there. Oh, that's it. Everything fell into place. I see. The show goes on? Mom, don't start, she said, her voice tinged with irritation. It's an important business dinner. Reginald specifically asked for you to come. They want to introduce you to their parents. I felt my eyebrows involuntarily creep upward. Their parents? Why? I don't know. She sounded genuinely annoyed now. Maybe they like the idea of a big family or something. What does it matter? Just come and be yourself. Be yourself. Coming from Cordelia, it sounded almost like an insult. Usually, she and Lowell wanted me to be anyone but myself. Okay, dear, I'll be there. On Saturday, I prepared especially carefully for the evening. I wore a dark green dress that, according to Winifred, brought out the color of my eyes, and pearl earrings that Frank had given me. I wasn't going to play the role of a faceless old woman in their family drama. If they wanted to show me to the Pearsons, they would see the real Helma Tyndall. The White Orchid turned out to be a stylish Asian-style restaurant. Minimalist decor, subdued lighting, waiters in elegant black kimonos. Cordelia and Lowell were already waiting for me at a table in the back of the room, along with the Pearsons and an elderly couple whom I assumed to be their parents. Here's Helma, Reginald exclaimed, rising to greet me. We're so glad you could join us. He introduced me to his parents, Herbert and Agatha Pearson, an elegant couple who looked remarkably spry for their age. Herbert was 85, as I later learned, and Agatha was 82. It's very nice to meet you, Agatha said, shaking my hand warmly. Reggie has told us so much about your family. He's just raved about how close you all are. I glanced quickly at Lowell, who sat with a tight smile on his face. The feeling is mutual, I replied sincerely. It's a pleasure to meet such a wonderful family. Dinner started off quite pleasantly. We ordered several dishes to share, a tradition that Herbert explained they had brought back from their travels in Asia. The conversation flowed easily, mostly about travel, art, and music. I discovered that Agatha and I had a lot in common: a love of jazz, classical literature, and gardening. Everything changed when the conversation turned to the Lakeview Estates project. We are very pleased to be working with Lowell, Herbert said. His vision is completely in line with the spirit of our family business. Is your business a family business? I asked with genuine interest. Oh, yes, Agatha replied proudly. Lakeview Estates is not just a business for us. It's a continuation of our family tradition. My father started the construction business over 70 years ago, and now Herbert and I have passed the reins to Reginald. And it's not just about construction, Herbert added. We create spaces where families can grow and thrive together, supporting each other across generations. That's why we were so attracted to Lowell's concept of using traditional elements in modern design. Lowell smiled modestly. I've always believed that true beauty comes from respecting both tradition and innovation. I struggled to suppress a chuckle. While Lowell, who constantly mocked everything old-fashioned and traditional in my house, had suddenly become a defender of tradition. And how does this respect for tradition manifest itself in your daily life, Lowell? I asked innocently. He gave me a sharp look. Well, for example, we teach our children to value the experience of older generations, he replied smoothly. Right, Cordelia. Cordelia nodded hastily. Yes, of course. Clayton and Abby love listening to their mother's stories about the past. When they have the opportunity, I added. What do you mean? Agatha asked. I just don't see my grandchildren as often as I'd like to, I replied honestly. Modern life is so busy, with so many things to do and responsibilities. Oh, that's true, Herbert nodded. But Agatha and I insisted that Sunday dinners be sacred. The whole family gets together, no phones, no excuses. What a wonderful tradition, I agreed. What traditions does your family have? Edith asked. Before I could answer, Lowell interjected. Unfortunately, our family gatherings have become less frequent in recent years. It's difficult for Helmy to accommodate a large family in her home. That's not true, I replied calmly. My home is always open to family. It's just that some people prefer to spend the holidays elsewhere. Like Thanksgiving in the Bahamas this year. Lowell smiled, but I saw a warning in his eyes. You're going to the Bahamas? Agatha asked in surprise. What about the traditional dinner? We thought it would be good for the children to broaden their horizons, Cordelia replied quickly. And it will be easier for Mom if she doesn't have to cook a big dinner. I love cooking for Thanksgiving, I said. It was Frank's favorite holiday. He and I always… Mom, Cordelia interrupted. I don't think anyone is interested in these old stories. We're very interested, Agatha objected. Family stories are what connect generations. Lowell was clearly nervous. The conversation was not going the way he had planned. Maybe next year we'll go back to the traditional celebration, he said uncertainly, with turkey, pumpkin pie, and the whole family. That would be wonderful, Agatha nodded. You know, Herbert and I celebrated our 60th wedding anniversary last year. We gathered the whole family, children, grandchildren, even great-grandchildren. More than 30 people at one table. It was wonderful. 60 years together, Lowell drawled with feigned admiration. That's amazing. So rare these days. Not so rare if you put your heart into the relationship, Herbert remarked. And you, Helma, how many years were you married to Frank? 38 years, I replied with a touch of sadness. He died 10 years ago. My condolences, Agatha said sincerely. It must have been very difficult. Yes, I nodded. But I'm lucky to have my daughter and her family. They're always there for me. I said this without irony. I just didn't want to bring our family problems out into the open. But Lowell seemed to take it as a sign that I was willing to support his false image of the perfect family. Helma is the real pillar of our family, he said, covering my hand with his in a feigned gesture of affection. She's always there when I need advice or support. Something about that gesture, perhaps his insincerity or simply years of pent-up irritation, made me react. How sweet of you, Lowell, I said, gently removing my hand. Especially considering how rarely you ask my advice. An awkward pause hung over the table. Well, I didn't want to bother you with trivial matters, he replied with a strained smile. Just like Thanksgiving, right? I didn't want to bother you with an invitation to a family dinner. Cordelia gave me a warning look. Mom, we already explained why we decided to go to the Bahamas. Yes, yes, I nodded. To broaden the children's horizons and save me the trouble of cooking dinner. Very thoughtful of you. Maybe we should order some more wine, Lowell suggested, clearly trying to change the subject. Great idea, Reginald agreed, although I noticed a slight confusion in his eyes. The waiter brought a new bottle, and the conversation turned to neutral topics: the weather, the latest movies, city news. But the tension at the table remained. After dessert was served, Agatha asked, "How do the children feel about your new project, Lowell? Are they interested in landscape design?" Not particularly, he replied casually. Clayton is more into computers, and Abby is still too young to have any serious interests. Abigail loves to draw, I objected. She has a real talent for color composition. I think she could follow in your footsteps, Lowell, if you spent more time with her. Mom, Cordelia interjected. Abby is only 6 years old. It's too early to talk about her future career. I'm not talking about her career, dear. I'm just pointing out her talent and interests, which, by the way, are worth pursuing. Lowell was beginning to lose patience. Helma, with all due respect, parenting methods have changed a lot since you raised Cordelia. Modern children need a structured approach, not idle pursuits like drawing. Is drawing an idle pursuit? Agatha asked in surprise. What about all the research on the importance of art for child brain development? It's not that it's idle, Lowell began to justify himself. It's just that in our competitive world, children need practical skills. Programming, languages, math. And not a minute to just be kids, I added. Lowell gave me an irritated look. I'm sorry if we don't want our children to grow up unprepared for real life. Unlike some people, we look to the future, not cling to the past. Lowell! Cordelia exclaimed, clearly shocked by his tone. No, it's okay, dear, I said calmly. I understand that your husband thinks I'm an outdated relic. He's never made any secret of it. I didn't say that, Lowell snapped. Not today, I agreed. Today you're playing the role of the caring son-in-law who respects tradition and family values because it's good for your business. A heavy silence hung over the table. The Pearsons looked stunned, Cordelia looked horrified, and Lowell looked like he was ready to kill me on the spot. I think you'd better leave, he finally hissed through clenched teeth. No, don't be like that, Herbert interjected. There's no need to get upset. Every family has disagreements. This isn't a disagreement, Lowell retorted, no longer hiding his irritation. This is an attempt to sabotage an important business dinner because of some petty grievances. Petty grievances? I asked, feeling a wave of anger rising inside me. You call it a petty grievance when you systematically alienate my daughter and grandchildren from me, that you mock me at every opportunity, that you make my own daughter ashamed of me? Mom, Cordelia exclaimed. Stop it right now. No, dear, I turned to her. I've been silent for too long. I've allowed both of you to treat me like an annoying nuisance in your perfect lives, but enough is enough. I deserve respect. If not as your mother, then at least as a human being. Helma, you're exaggerating, Lowell tried to intervene, glancing nervously at the Pearsons. No one treated you disrespectfully. Don't lie, I cut him off. Don't lie now when the truth is out. You never considered me part of your family. To you, I was always just an annoying reminder of Cordelia's past, which you try so hard to erase. Lowell turned pale with rage. But instead of continuing the argument, he turned to the Pearsons. I sincerely apologize for this unpleasant display. I'm afraid age is taking its toll. Helma doesn't always perceive reality accurately. That was the last straw. To imagine me as a senile old woman? To pretend that it's all a figment of my imagination? The reality, Lowell, is that you use people, I said, rising from the table. You used me to impress the Pearsons. You use my daughter, turning her into a pale copy of yourself. And I'm afraid you're using your children by not allowing them to be themselves. Lowell also stood up, his face contorted with anger. Enough! You have no idea what you're talking about. You're just a lonely, bitter old woman who can't accept that the world is moving on without her. Lowell! Reginald exclaimed, clearly shocked by this outburst. But Lowell couldn't stop himself. Do you know why we don't invite you over more often? Because you turn every visit into an exercise in self-pity. Oh, I'm so lonely. Oh, no one appreciates me. It's exhausting, Helma. It's pathetic. I felt the blood drain from my face. Never, even in the most tense situations, had Lowell been so openly cruel. Cordelia, I said to my daughter, who was sitting with her eyes downcast, is that what you think of me? That I'm a pathetic, bitter old woman? She looked up at me, and I was horrified to see in her eyes not sympathy, not remorse, but agreement. You always dramatize, Mom, she said quietly but firmly. You always make yourself the victim. Lowell is right. It's exhausting. Her words hit me harder than any of Lowell's insults. My own daughter, flesh of my flesh. I understand, I said, trying to maintain my dignity, even though inside I was falling apart. In that case, I won't bother you anymore. I turned to the Pearsons. It was nice meeting you. Sorry for the awkward situation. Helma, wait, Agatha began, but I was already heading for the door. Behind me, I heard Lowell's voice, not even trying to keep it down. See what I mean? Typical manipulation. Always a dramatic exit to get attention. And then something happened that I never expected to hear from my daughter. Mom! Cordelia called out to me, and I turned around hoping that she would take my side after all. But instead she blurted out, looking me straight in the eye, "From this day forward, you are not my mother. Get out!" The restaurant seemed to freeze. The patrons at the neighboring tables turned their heads in our direction. The waiters froze with their trays, and I stood there, stunned, unable to believe that my daughter had said those words. My daughter, whom I carried under my heart, whom I raised, loved, and was ready to give everything for. I don't remember how I left the restaurant. I don't remember how I caught a taxi. All the way home, I sat numb, unable even to cry. Cordelia's words rang in my ears. You're not my mother. At home, I mechanically undressed, took a shower, and went to bed. But sleep would not come. My daughter's face, contorted with anger, as if she truly hated me at that moment, was before my eyes. Somewhere deep inside, through the pain and shock, another feeling began to emerge. Quiet, but persistent. Anger. Not powerless resentment, but real, righteous anger. Lowell had been manipulating my daughter for years. He systematically destroyed our bond, turning Cordelia into his puppet. And I allowed it to happen, making excuses, forgiving everything, but not anymore. I will no longer silently endure their neglect. I will not smile and pretend that everything is fine when I am being humiliated. I will not be afraid to lose what is already lost. You are not my mother. Those words set me free. If I am no longer Cordelia's mother, then I am free from my obligations to her. Free to act as I see fit, without fear of the consequences for our relationship. I rolled onto my side, looking at the photo of Frank on the bedside table. What would you do, Frank? I whispered. How would you protect our daughter from herself? The photograph remained silent, but somewhere deep down, I knew the answer. Frank never tolerated injustice. He always fought for what he believed was right, even if it was difficult or inconvenient. I closed my eyes and for the first time in many years felt a strange sense of calm. The decision was made. Tomorrow I would take action. Lowell Knight would regret turning my daughter into his obedient reflection. He would regret every humiliating word he had thrown at me. He would regret depriving my grandchildren of their grandmother, and Cordelia, Maybe someday she'll understand that I'm not doing this out of revenge, but out of love. Out of the very maternal love that she so easily rejected at dinner. With that thought, I finally fell into a deep and peaceful sleep, the kind I hadn't had in a long time. The morning after that ill-fated dinner, I woke up with a clear head and a firm intention to act. The pain from my daughter's words hadn't gone away. It pulsed somewhere deep inside, but now it was mixed with a new feeling: determination. In my 42 years as a court interpreter, I had seen enough human baseness to know that sometimes justice must be taken into one's own hands. The first thing I did was call Winifred. She always got up early, a habit developed over years of working in court. Helma? What's wrong? Are you okay? Her voice sounded concerned. I rarely called so early. I told her about last night, about Lowell's cruel words, about Cordelia's betrayal. Winifred listened without interrupting, only occasionally uttering a quiet, "Oh." That, she swore so profusely that I couldn't help but smile. Even at 76, Winifred was not shy about using strong language. How could she, after everything you've done for her? It's not Cordelia, I replied. More precisely, not just her. Lowell has been turning her against me for years, and you know what? I've had enough. I won't put up with it anymore. And rightly so, exclaimed Winifred. It's about time you put him in his place. I want more than that, Win, I said quietly. I want him to feel what it's like when everything you've built over the years comes crashing down in an instant. What it's like to be humiliated and betrayed. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Helma, Winifred finally said, are you talking about revenge? Call it justice, she sighed. What are you planning? I don't know yet, but I'll find a way. Lowell must have skeletons in his closet. People like that always have something to hide. And how are you going to find them? There was doubt in Winifred's voice, but also curiosity. I still have connections, Vin. People who owe me or just like me. I'll start with Raymond. Raymond Price, the private investigator who helped with the Morgenstern case. Is he still working? He is, and he owes me. I helped him with the translation in that Mexican drug cartel case, remember? He wasn't even officially in court, but his client avoided prison thanks to my accurate translation. Helma, Winifred's voice took on a note of alarm. Are you sure you want to get involved in all this? Maybe you should just let it go? Focus on yourself, on your life? I shook my head even though I knew she couldn't see it. I tried, Vin. For years I tried to close my eyes, forgive, let go, and what did I get? You're not my mother. No, Vin, enough. After talking to Winifred, I called Raymond Price. He answered on the third ring. Raymond Price here. Hi, Raymond, it's Helma Tyndall. Pause. Mrs. Tyndall, his voice warmed. What a pleasant surprise. How many years has it been? Almost 10, Raymond, since I left the court. And how are you? Not bad. But I need your help, Raymond. Professional help. He instantly became serious. What happened? I need information about a person. Potentially compromising information. I'm listening. Lowell Knight. He owns Knight Gardens, a landscaping company, and he's my brother-in-law. Raymond whistled. Family matters? That's always complicated. Believe me, this stopped being just a family matter a long time ago. It's a matter of justice. I understand. What specifically are you interested in? Everything. His business practices, his personal life, his past. I need to know what he's hiding, and he's definitely hiding something. This could be expensive, Raymond warned, and it will take time. I have both, and I have reason to believe he's running a dishonest business. He recently landed a big contract with Lakeview Estates. Maybe that's a good place to start? Good idea. I'll look into it. Give me a week. After calling Raymond, I felt a surge of energy. I was no longer a helpless victim. I was taking action. The next item on my agenda was Vanessa Keller, Judge Davidson's secretary, who had once been a close friend of mine. Vanessa had retired a couple of years before me, but we had stayed in touch. Her husband, Paul, worked on the Environmental Protection Committee and might have access to information about companies that violated environmental regulations. Vanessa, it's been so long, I exclaimed when she opened the door to her cozy home on the outskirts of Queens. Too long, Helma, she said, hugging me. Come in, I just made some tea. We sat in her sunny kitchen, drinking tea with homemade cookies, and I told her about my problem, trying not to get into too many personal details. Landscape design, you say? Vanessa said thoughtfully. Paul mentioned that some companies use banned chemicals to accelerate plant growth or pesticides that have long been banned in most states. Maybe your brother-in-law is one of them? That's exactly what I want to find out, I nodded. Do you think Paul could take a look? Vanessa smiled understandingly. For you, Helma, of course. We both remember how you helped us with the custody case for our nephews. Without your translation of their Mexican nanny's testimony, we would never have gotten custody. When I got home, it was already late. I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Fatigue after a busy day, anxiety about what I had decided to do, but also relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of the situation, rather than just going with the flow and letting others decide my fate. I spent the next few days methodically building my network of informants. I contacted Martin Chang, a former colleague from the court, whose son worked in banking. Eleanor Jones, who after retiring from her position as a court clerk, became a consultant for the tax service. Gregory Patterson, a former district attorney who now taught at law school. All these people had once worked with me, knew me as a professional, and respected me for my accuracy and dedication to my work. And they all agreed to help, some out of old friendship, some out of gratitude for past favors. 5 days after our conversation, Raymond called me. Mrs. Tyndall, I have something interesting. We met in a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Raymond looked older, but his eyes were still sharp and attentive. Your son-in-law isn't as clean as he wants to appear, he said, handing me a thin folder. Night Gardens contracts for expensive, environmentally friendly materials, but actually uses cheap substitutes, including pesticides that are banned in our state. I opened the folder. Inside were photos of warehouses, invoices, and price comparison charts. Where did you get this? I have a source within the company, a junior purchasing manager who has long been dissatisfied with the company's policies. He provided evidence that Night Gardens was not only cutting corners on materials, but also putting the health of its customers at risk. Some of the chemicals they use are linked to an increased risk of cancer and respiratory diseases. I felt a chill inside. Lowell wasn't just deceiving customers, he was gambling with their health. This is more serious than I expected. Raymond nodded. And that's not all. Your brother-in-law has a very active personal life outside of marriage. He pulled a flash drive out of his pocket. Here are photos and messages confirming his relationship with Amanda Hall, Robert Hall's wife. Who is Robert Hall? The owner of Hall Construction, the main contractor for Lakeview Estates. I stared at the flash drive in shock. So Lowell is having an affair with the wife of his most important business partner? Exactly. And judging by the messages, their relationship began long before he got the Lakeview contract. Maybe it was even part of his strategy. I felt sick. I always suspected that Lowell was capable of anything to further his ambitions, but to use a woman like that? Thanks, Raymond. This is very useful information. He looked at me seriously. What are you going to do with it? I don't know yet, but I'll find a way to use it for its intended purpose. The next day, Paul, Vanessa's husband, called me. Helma, I checked what you asked about. Night Gardens is indeed on our watch list. There have been complaints from anonymous sources about environmental violations, but there is not yet enough evidence for a formal investigation. What if such evidence did emerge? Then the company would face serious problems. Fines, license suspension, possibly even criminal prosecution if intentional harm is proven. I see. Thanks, Paul. Helma, his voice became concerned. Whatever you're planning, be careful. These are dangerous waters. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. 2 days later, Eleanor called me. You were right, Helma, she said without preamble. I checked Night Garden's tax returns for the last 5 years. There are discrepancies that would make an audit a nightmare for your brother-in-law. What kind of discrepancies? Inflated business expenses, questionable write-offs, possibly even unreported income. Nothing that could be called outright fraud, without a thorough investigation, but enough to attract the attention of the tax authorities. And what does that require? An anonymous tip from a concerned citizen, Eleanor chuckled. With enough specifics to initiate an investigation. Can I count on your help in drafting such a tip? For you, of course. By the end of the week, I had gathered enough information to bury Lowell's career and reputation 10 times over. Environmental violations, tax fraud, customer deception, unethical business practices, marital infidelity. Each of these allegations could deal a serious blow to his standing in society and business. Together, they represented a perfect storm that could destroy everything he had built over the years. Now I had to decide how exactly to use this information. I sat in my living room with all the material I had gathered spread out in front of me, thinking about a plan of action. Simply informing all interested parties, the tax authorities, the environmental committee, Robert Hall, the Pearsons, anonymously might work. But that would be a one-time blow. Lowell could somehow wriggle out of it, use his connections to minimize the damage. No, I needed something more artistic. Something that would not only deal a blow to his business and reputation, but also make him feel the same humiliation I had felt all these years. And then it hit me. What if I used what Lowell valued most against him? His image as the perfect family man and businessman with an impeccable reputation. I took a sheet of paper and began to sketch out a plan. First, an anonymous letter to the Environmental Committee with copies of the evidence provided by Raymond. Specific enough to initiate an official investigation, but not revealing everything at once. Second, a similar letter to the tax authorities drafted with Eleanor's help to ensure an audit of Night Garden's finances. Third, arrange a chance meeting between Cordelia and Amanda Hall. Not to tell her directly about her husband's infidelity, but to create a situation where the truth could come out on its own. Fourth, ensure that information about Lowell's unethical business practices reached the Pearsons and other key clients, possibly through anonymous letters with evidence or through a leak in the local press. I reread my plan. It was methodical, multi-layered, and most importantly, it gave Lowell enough time to realize what was happening before the final blow destroyed everything he had built. But there was something else that bothered me. Cordelia, my daughter. Despite her cruel words, I couldn't completely shut off my maternal feelings. My plan would inevitably hurt her too. I remembered her face in the restaurant when she uttered those terrible words. From this day forward, you are not my mother. At that moment, there was nothing left of the girl I had raised. Lowell had completely remade her in his own image. Maybe this would be her chance at freedom? A chance to see who the man she had blindly followed all these years really was? I couldn't be sure, but I knew one thing. After everything that had happened, I couldn't just back down and let Lowell continue to poison my daughter and grandchildren's lives with his toxic influence. The next morning, I began to put my plan into action. First, I sent an anonymous letter to the Environmental Committee, attaching some of the evidence Raymond had collected. Then I contacted Eleanor to draft a formal appeal to the tax authorities. On the third day, I called Raymond with a special request. I need information about Amanda Hall's schedule, where she goes, who she meets. May I ask why? I want my daughter to bump into her by chance, in a situation where the truth can come out naturally. Raymond paused. That's risky, Mrs. Tyndall. If your daughter suspects that the meeting was staged, she won't suspect anything. Just find me a place and time where such a meeting could take place. A day later, Raymond called back. Amanda Hall attends yoga classes every Thursday at 11 a.m. at the Inner Peace Studio on Maple Street. After class, she usually has lunch at the Greenleaf Cafe across the street, often with other women from the studio. Great. Now I just need to figure out how to lure Cordelia there. One more thing, Mrs. Tyndall. I've discovered that Amanda isn't your son-in-law's only extramarital affair. There have been at least 2 other women in the last year. I felt my stomach churn with disgust. Thank you, Raymond. This information could be useful. To complete the plan, I needed to prepare an information package for Lowell's key clients, including the Pearsons. I gathered all the evidence of his unethical business practices, photos of cheap toxic materials used instead of the promised eco-friendly ones, price comparison charts showing the huge difference between what clients paid for and what they actually received. Testimony from a junior purchasing manager. I compiled all this information into a neat folder with a cover letter explaining the nature of the violations in simple, understandable language. The letter began with the words, "As a customer, you have the right to know what is really happening with your money and your health." I made several copies of this package, one for the Pearsons, one for other major Lowell customers whose names I was able to find out, and one for the local newspaper, the Quincy Chronicle. Looking at the materials I had gathered, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: satisfaction from a job well done, anxiety about the possible consequences, and, oddly enough, some relief. Finally, I was taking action instead of just accepting the blows of fate. When everything was ready, I called Winifred again. "I'm starting tomorrow," I said without preamble. "Are you sure, Helma? This is a serious step." "More than sure. I just wanted someone to know, in case something went wrong." Winifred sighed. "Be careful, dear. People like your brother-in-law aren't used to losing. When they feel threatened, they can be dangerous." "I know, but I won't back down. Not this time." Before going to sleep, I reviewed all the materials once more, checking every detail of the plan. Everything was ready. Tomorrow the wheel would start turning and nothing could stop it. I looked at Frank's photo on the bedside table. "I hope you would approve," I whispered. "Not what I'm about to do, but the reasons why I'm doing it." In the morning, I woke up with the feeling that today was the beginning of a new phase in my life. It was like those days when I first crossed the threshold of the courtroom as an interpreter. Nervous, but determined to do my job to the best of my ability. I put on my favorite ivory suit, the one I once wore to an international conference of court interpreters. It still fit perfectly, as if it had been made for important days like this. The plan was to send the anonymous letters first. I mailed them from different post offices in Quincy so as not to arouse suspicion. Envelopes containing evidence of Lowell's unethical practices were sent to his main clients, including the Pearsons, as well as to the editorial office of the Quincy Chronicle. I personally delivered a special package with more detailed information about the environmental violations to the office of the Environmental Protection Committee, leaving it at the reception desk as urgent material for review. When that part of the plan was complete, I felt a strange sense of relief. Now all that remained was to arrange a chance meeting between Cordelia and Amanda Hall. I knew that Cordelia usually went shopping downtown on Thursdays. I had to figure out how to lure her to the Greenleaf Cafe at the exact time Amanda would be there after her yoga class. After some thought, I decided to take direct action, to call my daughter. Despite our last conversation at the restaurant, I was sure she would pick up the phone. Cordelia had always been too well-mannered to completely ignore my calls, even when she was angry with me. "Hello?" Her voice sounded wary, but not hostile. "Hello, Cordelia," I said calmly. Pause. "Mom, I didn't expect you to call." Her tone was a mixture of surprise and confusion. "After what happened?" "Me neither," I replied. "But I thought, maybe we should talk." Calmly, just you and me. Another pause, longer than the last. "Why?" "Because despite everything, you're my daughter," I said sincerely. "And if we want any kind of relationship in the future, we need to clear some things up." I could feel her hesitation through the phone. "I don't know, Mom." "Lowell thinks it's best if we take a break from talking." Of course Lowell thinks that. But I was prepared for this. "I'm not asking you to meet at home or anywhere private. Let's just have coffee somewhere in town. The Greenleaf Cafe, for example. I hear they have excellent organic desserts." "The Greenleaf?" I heard interest in her voice. Cordelia had always been health conscious, especially after she married Lowell. "I've never been there. It's on Maple Street. I can meet you there around noon today if you're not busy." "Today is Thursday," she said thoughtfully. "I had plans to go shopping, but I can stop by the cafe around noon. Half an hour, no more." "Perfect." Amanda Hall usually arrived around 11:30 and stayed for lunch. "Great," I said. "See you there." I arrived at the Greenleaf early, around 11:15. The cozy cafe with large windows, green plants in every corner, and a menu full of organic dishes was already half full. I chose a table at the back of the room with a good view of the entrance and ordered a cup of herbal tea. At 11:35, several women in sportswear entered the cafe, apparently after a yoga class. Among them, I easily recognized Amanda Hall from the photos Raymond had shown me. A tall blonde with an athletic figure and bright makeup that seemed a little out of place after physical exercise. The women sat down at a large table not far from me. I continued to drink my tea calmly, glancing at my watch. Cordelia was always punctual. At 5 minutes to 12, I saw her parking in front of the cafe through the window. My heart beat faster. Now I had to follow the plan exactly. When Cordelia entered, I waved to her. She headed toward me, looking a little tense but determined. Her gaze was focused on me, so she didn't notice Amanda sitting just a couple of tables away from us. "Hi, Mom," she said, sitting down across from me. "Hello, dear, you look wonderful." It was true. At 43, Cordelia looked younger than her age, with flawless skin and a slim figure that she maintained through constant exercise and a strict diet. "Thank you," she smiled awkwardly. "So, what did you want to talk about?" I sighed, gathering my thoughts. "First of all, I'd like to apologize for what happened at the restaurant. I shouldn't have made a scene." Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. "You apologize?" "Yes. Regardless of what I think of Lowell or your attitude toward me, public conflict was inappropriate, especially in front of strangers." She looked confused, as if she hadn't expected the conversation to start this way. "Well, thank you. I may have overreacted too." That was the closest I could hope for to an apology from Cordelia. "Let's order something," I suggested, handing her the menu. "They have great smoothies here." While Cordelia studied the menu, I noticed Amanda Hall chatting animatedly with her friends, occasionally laughing louder than would be appropriate in such a place. Now I needed to draw my daughter's attention to that table. "It's pretty busy for a weekday," I remarked as the waiter took our order. Cordelia looked around. "Yes, it looks like they're gathering here after some kind of class." "Yoga, I think." I nodded toward Amanda's table. "The Inner Peace Studio is across the street. Have you considered taking up yoga? They say it's great for stress." Cordelia followed my gaze and suddenly froze. Her face changed, taking on an expression of shock and disbelief. "Is something wrong?" I asked with feigned concern. "No, no, everything's fine," she replied quickly, looking away from Amanda's table. But it was obvious that she had recognized the woman. Our conversation continued, but Cordelia became distracted. She kept glancing over at Amanda, who still didn't seem to have noticed our presence. "Are you sure you're okay?" I asked. "You look worried." "It's fine," Cordelia snapped. "It's just, I think I know one of those women." "Really? From where?" Cordelia faltered. "She came to our house for Lowell's work. I feigned surprise." "Oh, you mean the blonde? Is she involved in landscape design?" "Not exactly," Cordelia said, visibly nervous. "Her husband is one of Lowell's main partners on a new project." "I see," I nodded, taking a sip of tea. "She seems colorful." Cordelia didn't answer, her attention completely absorbed by Amanda's table. And at that moment, what I had been hoping for happened. Amanda finally noticed us. More precisely, she noticed Cordelia. Her expression changed instantly from carefree cheerfulness to confusion and anxiety. She quickly turned away, leaning toward one of her friends and whispering something. "Mom, I have to go," Cordelia said suddenly, starting to gather her things. "But we just ordered," I objected. "What's wrong?" "I just remembered I have an appointment. I'm sorry." At that moment, Amanda got up from the table and headed for the exit, giving Cordelia another nervous glance. But instead of just leaving, she paused at the door, feverishly typing something on her phone. Cordelia also took out her phone and glanced at the screen. Her face paled. "I really have to go," she said, standing up. "I'll call you later." She quickly left the cafe without even saying goodbye properly. Through the window, I saw her approach Amanda, and they began a lively conversation while standing on the sidewalk. The expressions on their faces did not bode well for Lowell. I calmly finished my tea, paid the bill, and left through another door so as not to run into them. My part of the job was done. Now all that remained was to wait for all the pieces of the plan to come together. The results were not long in coming. The next day, the Queen's Chronicle published an article titled, "Local Landscaping Company Suspected of Environmental Violations." It did not mention Lowell by name, but it did mention the company working on the Lakeview Estates project, leaving no doubt as to who it was referring to. By evening, I got a call from Paul, Vanessa's husband. Helma, I don't know if you have anything to do with this, but the Environmental Committee has launched an official investigation into Night Gardens. The materials that were submitted anonymously were so convincing that the matter was referred directly to the prosecutor's office. Really? I tried to make my voice sound innocent. How interesting. This is serious, Helma. If the allegations are confirmed, your brother-in-law faces not only fines, but also criminal prosecution. Well, the law is the law, I replied neutrally. Thanks for letting me know, Paul. 3 days later, Winifred called me. Have you seen today's newspaper? She asked without preamble. Not yet. Has something happened? Pearson's terminate contract with Night Gardens amid allegations of fraud and environmental violations, she quoted from the headline. Helma, is this your doing? Perhaps, I replied evasively. Well done, girl, Winifred said approvingly. It's never too late to stand up for yourself. It was a news-filled week. One after another, Lowell's clients terminated their contracts with him. The Environmental Committee and the Internal Revenue Service were conducting audits at Night Gardens, and rumors were circulating in town about a high-profile divorce in the Hall family. But there was no word from Cordelia. I didn't call her, deciding that she should make the first move, if of course she wanted to. And on the 10th day after my operation began, the call finally came. Mom? Cordelia's voice sounded broken, as if she were crying. Are you home? Can I come over? Of course, dear, I replied calmly. I'll be waiting. She arrived half an hour later. She looked terrible, pale, her eyes red from crying, wearing a jacket thrown on carelessly. Everything is falling apart, Mom, she said as soon as she crossed the threshold. Our whole world is falling apart. I led her into the living room and poured her a cup of hot tea. Tell me what happened. And she told me about how she had discovered Lowell's affair with Amanda Hall. How Amanda, cornered, confessed that their affair had been going on for over a year. How Lowell first denied everything, and then, when denial became pointless, accused Cordelia of not supporting him enough. And then all these business problems started, Cordelia continued, nervously fingering her fingers. Clients are canceling contracts, the Pearsons have terminated their agreement, the Environmental Committee is conducting an investigation. Lowell is panicking. He says someone is deliberately trying to destroy him. I listened silently, not betraying my emotions. And you know what's the worst part? Her voice trembled. I'm starting to think he deserves it. That all these years I've been turning a blind eye to who he really is. I gently touched her hand. Sometimes it takes time to see people's true nature. She looked up at me with reddened eyes. You always saw it, didn't you? That's why he didn't like it when you came. He was afraid you would open my eyes. I didn't answer that question directly. What are you going to do now? Cordelia sighed deeply. I don't know. Lowell says everything will work out, that these are just temporary difficulties, but I don't believe him anymore, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust him again. What about the children? They don't know anything yet. We try not to argue in front of them, but they sense that something is wrong. Especially Abigail, she's always been sensitive. Cordelia paused, then looked at me hopefully. Mom, can the kids and I stay with you for a while? I need to think things through, make a decision, and it will be good for Lowell to be alone and realize his mistakes. This is it. What I've been waiting for. The moment when my daughter, who had pushed me away, came to me for help, and something inside me, the part that still loved her unconditionally, wanted to agree immediately, to open my arms, to protect her. But another part, wiser and more far-sighted, knew that would be a mistake. Cordelia, I began gently but firmly, I sympathize with your situation, I really do, but I can't offer you and the children a place to live here. She looked as if I had hit her. What? Why? Because a week ago you told me I wasn't your mother, I replied calmly. And you know what? It freed me. All my life I was willing to forgive you anything because you're my daughter. To endure neglect, to remain silent when I was humiliated, to allow myself to be pushed away from my grandchildren. All for the sake of preserving our bond. Cordelia turned even paler. Mom, that's not what I meant. I was upset, angry. And you said what you really felt at that moment. I finished for her. I'm grateful to you for that honesty. She made me think about what I really want from the rest of my life, and it's definitely not to be a backup option that you turn to only when you're feeling bad. That's not fair, she whispered. Maybe, I agreed. But life is rarely fair, as you will learn from your own experience. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. I will always love you, Cordelia. You are my daughter, a part of me. But I will no longer sacrifice my dignity and happiness for a relationship that only brings pain. What am I supposed to do now? Her voice sounded desperate. The same thing all adults do when they face difficulties, I replied. Make decisions and take responsibility for them. Rent an apartment if you don't want to stay with Lowell. Talk to a lawyer about a possible divorce. Find a good child psychologist for Clayton and Abigail. Cordelia looked at me with such amazement, as if she were seeing me for the first time. You've changed, Mom. Yes, I agreed. And that's good. When the door closed behind her, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. I love my daughter and always would. But now I loved myself enough to not let that love be used against me anymore. The next day, I called a travel agency and booked a ticket to Italy. All my life, I had dreamed of seeing Florence, walking the streets of Rome, visiting the small towns of Tuscany. Frank had always promised that we would go there when we retired, but fate had other plans. Now I was ready to make that dream come true on my own. 2 weeks later, as I was finishing packing for my trip, Raymond called me. Mrs. Tyndall, I just wanted to let you know. Your son-in-law has been formally charged with fraud and environmental violations. He may avoid prison, but his business is definitely over. Thank you, Raymond, I replied. Please keep me informed. Are you leaving? Yes, to Italy. For a month, maybe longer. That sounds wonderful, he said, his voice filled with genuine happiness for me. Enjoy every moment. You deserve it. At the airport, waiting to board, I checked my email on the new tablet I had bought especially for the trip. Among other messages, there was one from Cordelia. Mom, I understand why you refused to take us in. I would probably have done the same in your place. The children and I rented a small apartment near their school. We are starting a new life. I filed for divorce. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for everything that happened, but I want you to know that I realize how much I lost by pushing you away, and I will work to earn your trust and love again. With love, Cordelia. I reread the letter twice, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. Maybe someday we can really build a new, healthy relationship. But not now. Right now, I need time for myself. I closed my email without replying to the letter. On the plane, I'll open a new book, order a glass of good wine, and think not about the past, but about the future. About sunny Tuscany, the museums of Florence, the small squares of Siena. They announced boarding for my flight. I picked up my bag and headed for the exit, feeling light and determined. For the first time in many years, I didn't look back.